I'm with Chris Seymour, the Managing Director of Mott, Macdonald, Middle East, and another speaker today at Hypermotion, Dubai Hypermotion Lab. Chris was a speaker in a panel discussion, Planning for Cities Without Streets, Rethinking the Built Environments. Chris, thanks for being with us.
No problem, pleased to be here.
Yeah, cities without streets, it seems like a bit of a paradox. Is it even possible?
I'm in the camp that says yes, it is possible, and I think that we can already see examples of that. In quite well-known example of that is in Saudi Arabia, where they've got the opportunity to actually create new cities. Neom is a new city, and it has been advertised as just a line, and that in itself challenges the normal concept of a city that we all learnt about at college, which was really a series of concentric rings with the car having primacy. And the line fundamentally challenges that and teaches us that actually if you can create a primary route of transportation, a primary route of mobility for not just people but for goods, you can actually create, if you like, an ecosystem around that, which to an extent makes the street redundant. And so I think that's a great example, quite an extreme example, very futuristic.
Very unique, isn't it?
It is indeed. But so in a way, it would be completely wrong for me to sit here and say, no, it's not possible. It is possible. And I think we can see it. Of course, the challenge is existing cities. Cities are long-term bets, and that rate of change is quite hard to handle sometimes.
Yeah, and I guess Neom was unique in that, okay, it kind of like started from scratch. And I guess geography plays a key role in planning cities and urban environments without streets. I mean, cities like Hong Kong, where it's very densely populated, Singapore, I guess as well. We could envisage that eventually these cities perhaps would not have streets or would not have roads.
That's a great, and that's a great example. And so Hong Kong, Singapore, London, these cities without streets, we would at first be denying some massive inbuilt efficiency that they have. And we know that in one of those centres, the ground transportation mobility is so efficient that you can pretty much order something online and you will get it within 30 minutes. Why is that? It's because that incredibly efficient network of streets.
And by necessity as well.
And indeed by necessity. So I think what we're seeing in those existing intensely dense cities, we're seeing a change in the use of the streets, rather than saying actually we do not need them anymore. And I think that will come from the reducing dominance of the car, better use of a car's time with automation. We should have fewer cars, less density, better efficiency in communication. So those streets will still be used, probably less intensely by the car, and we may see more use of logistics. And then there's definitely, in some cities that are lucky enough to be in a temperate climate, they can indeed be used as much more efficient walkways. It plays to that climate agenda. It plays to the well-being piece as well, and I think that is something that's going to be it's going to be clearly dominant in the design of cities going forward. So, to some extent, we just got to be careful that we don't see streets as an evil. They are not, and I think in those existing centres, it's probably more about how we reuse them.
Yeah, and I guess one of the questions, of course, in your panel was distinguishing the difference between streets and roads and what's a liability and what's an asset. You're obviously in the camp of as the street is an asset and a road is a liability. Why is that?
Yeah, it's a good. And thank you for playing that question back to me, actually. So when you see Dubai is a great example. We're sitting here, so let's use it as that example, where we've created Dubai being almost a city with cities, which is made up of separate cities. When we see those satellite cities created, those streets create community. And with community comes sustainability, not just around energy, but it comes sustainability around the social and also the economic aspects too. The roads or highways that actually link all those parts up in a commercial sense, they are definitely a liability. It's an asset that needs maintaining, a significant cost in maintaining. It has inbuilt economic value because it's actually feeding those other satellites and it's creating that whole city ecosystem to work. I think
Sort of several mini cities within.
to a certain extent, and so I think what we're going to see is that as mobility options change, as we also talked about that big demand change, which we have seen not just in public transport, but in the use of cars as well. Then some of those connecting roads and highways, they may become as redundant, and it's important that going forward when we design, we recognise that demand for those connecting roads and highways is now lower because of the improvement in the efficiency of those individual communities, but also the changing choices people have got on mobility.
Yeah, and so as we see a gradual decline or reduction in roads or those sort of connecting points, are we going to see more vertical transportation or transportation in the air? Drones, for example, perhaps, and getting around.
I think that third dimension is going to be really important, and I think that what we will be able to see is that that different choice in modes of mobility. So we're not just talking about aviation in that third dimension, but there's certain elevated mobility solutions which cities are also actively considering now. So again, takes the pressure off the roads. But I think there is also what goes with that is something else that we talked about, which was that latent efficiency in our cities to potentially handle greater demand around those assets. So if you don't have the requirement to live in one place, work in another, and you can actually blend that, then the existing infrastructure can probably handle more volume, more capacity, which is great news for a city because cities are economic hubs. And if you can actually create, if you can actually attract more population because your resources of your infrastructure can actually handle it, then that's just good news.
Do governments and city planners and councils, municipalities, do they need to drastically rethink how urban environments are planned now? As you mentioned, of course, when you were going to college, and maybe even me to a certain extent, of course, the way cities were planned was built around the car and that sort of grid platform.
Right. Yeah.
And it's obviously changed. It's changing now, and technology is driving that change, and climate change and sustainability is driving that change by necessity. Is that change happening fast enough when it comes to planning urban cities around mobility?
I think it's happening fast enough from a planning perspective. The inconvenient truth is that most mobility assets are fixed, long-term, heavy civil engineering structures which are extremely unadaptable. And so this comes back to where are you going to make your bet in terms of planning for the future. And I think this comes back to the need to decide what that future is rather than waiting and finding out. And the bit I always think that one of the great pictures of transformation that is quite popular is the picture of New York City in 1901 and then New York City in 1912. In 1901, not a single car on the road, only horses. 1912, the same streets, no horses, it was all cars. So it has happened in the past, and I think that we need to get ready for that change now, driven by climate, for sure. Solutions around that third dimension that we were talking about as well, and that increase in efficiency driven by that change in the fact that we've awarded our citizens choice in where they work, and all of these things, you're feeling it's coming together. For me, if you look back over the last 10 years, there wasn't a lot of change, not a lot of change. The big change you can see is that in 2010, you wanted a different mobile phone to the one you wanted in 2020, being blunt about it. But if you look from now until 2030, in 2030, it will be difficult to buy a car powered by petrol. And just that alone is a fundamental change from what we've been seeing. So this next 10 years for doing the job, for doing this job is going to be extremely exciting, honestly. I think and most of us are in the same boat. We can't wait.
And of course, I guess that brings me to my final question. Of course, you're here at Hypermotion Dubai on this quite important panel discussion, very intriguing panel discussion. From your point of view, I guess it's important to, from your side as from the private sector, of course, we've got consumers, and of course, as governments, there must be a real sort of collaboration, a need to collaborate on all three parties to really plan for an urban environment of the future around the mobility landscape.
Yeah, so I completely agree with you, and I think that at the moment we are seeing a very the public sector, the governments, not just here in the UAE but across the region, have really come together with the private sector to pose exactly the questions we've been discussing, to try to learn what is the next thing that's coming, what innovation are you thinking about that could help us with this, and events like this create hubs for that. And I would also I'd also say must be about 18 months since we've been coming to events like this, and I have to say it is a great tonic to get together face to face and actually discuss some of these issues. Those conversations we've been having have been probably of far more value than honestly we've been having over a Teams environment in the last 18 months. So it's great to be out and about. It's great to be getting to see people in 3 dimensions again. So yeah,
exactly, live in person again.
Indeed, yeah.
Exciting times ahead then.
Indeed they are.
Chris, thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of Hypermotion Dubai. I'm sure you'll be here the next couple of days, and
I will, yeah.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you very much.